I would like to mention, rather in an informal manner, two contributions made by St Chavara, for which the church in Kerala and particularly the Syro Malabar Church has to be ever grateful to him. The first thing is that he successfully managed a crisis that would otherwise lead to a disastrous schism in the church. It was in the year 1861. That year, in the month of May, an unauthorized Chaldean bishop called Thomas Rokos landed in Kochi. It was a time when the people in this place were fed up and even disgusted with the Carmelite European bishop and his missionaries of Varappuzha Vicariate. The reason was these missionaries, generally speaking, utterly failed to understand the culture and the sentiments of the people of this place. They didn't know the local language, nor did they understand their traditions and practices, and therefore these missionaries failed to treat them with due respect and a sense of human dignity. And as a result, the people, rightly on their part, wanted to have their own Syrian bishops that they had some time before. But at the same time, for various reasons, the Holy See had instructed the Chaldean Patriarch not to interfere in the affairs of the church in Kerala. But against that instruction, maybe under the pressure from his own people, the Patriarch of that time consecrated Thomas Rokos as bishop, and he sent him to Kerala. Of course, he did not want Bishop Rokos to stay here, nor to interfere with the administrative matters of this church. He was sent just to study the affairs of this place and to report. But as he landed in Kochi, the people accorded him a very warm, rousing welcome, because they were misguided by the rebel leaders that Bishop Rokos had come with the due permission and authorization from the Holy Father, and that he was sent by the Holy Father as the bishop for this people. The people naturally were taken up and were very, very enthusiastic in following this bishop. As Bishop Rokos landed in Kochi, he was given a very warm welcome by the local people under the guidance of their leaders. And these leaders had misguided them, saying that Rokos had come with the due permission and approval of the Holy Father. Bishop Rokos also was taken up by the reception he got, and therefore he also started pretending that he was legitimately sent by the Holy Father, and thus a real movement against the existing administration of Arapura started. And to be short, in a few months' time, the vast majority of the parishes of this place, the Syrian parishes, went over to the side of Bishop Rokos. We had those days a total of 154 parishes. Out of them, except 32, all of these joined hands with Bishop Rokos. The Bishop of Arapura, Bernardine Baccinelli, and his team could only keep looking on helplessly. And things had reached a point where the people had stopped believing the bishop and the administration of Arapura. They had lost confidence in them. Therefore, the repeated instruction from the bishop that the newly arrived bishop was without authorization was not acceptable for the people. They frankly said that the bishop of Arapura was trying to misguide them so that he could hold on to his power. The bishop had only one way left to save the situation: to give these people a vicar general chosen from among themselves, whom they would trust and believe. And he met a person of that sort in St Chavara, who was then the prior general of the newly started congregation of the Servants of Mary Immaculate of Mount Carmel in Mannanam. Very soon, he was appointed the Vicar General for the Syrians of that time. Reluctantly, but under obedience, he accepted the appointment and soon started working at his mission. Very prudently and very efficiently, he moved and took steps such as getting direct information from the Holy Father regarding Bishop Rokos, and then persuading his people not to follow the intruder Bishop Rokos. He also very tactfully and gently spoke with the bishop intruder Rokos. And within a few months' time, about 10 months' time, the bishop decided and agreed to go home, provided he would be helped with the travel expenses and all the arrangements related to his travel. St Chavara negotiated with the bishop for the sake of Bishop Rokos, and Bishop Baccinelli agreed that he would meet all the expenses of the travel of Rokos on condition that he should acknowledge his mistake and be ready to accept whatever penance the Holy Father would impose on him. Rocos, of course, agreed that he had come without permission from the Holy Father, and he had sent by his patriarch not to stay and administer, but just to study the affairs directly and then to report. But he refused to accept that he had done any mistake, because he said he was ready to go back as soon as he was called back by the Holy Father. Anyway, finally, he was sent back in a very peaceful and Christian manner, with the efforts and persuasion of St Chavara. And thus, a great disaster that was possibly there was avoided, and the unity of the church was maintained. And very soon, very tactfully, lovingly, gently, St Chavara succeeded in bringing together all the parishes that had got separated. This was the great contribution St Chavara made to the Church of Kerala, for which we should ever be grateful to him. We should rightly say the Church of Kerala, particularly this Syro-Malabar Church, is today what she is because of this great man, St Chavara. A second contribution of St Chavara to the Church of Kerala is that he began a religious congregation. Of course, he was helped and he was working along with two other great personalities, namely Father Thomas Palekal and Thomas Porukara. It was a time when there was no consecrated life at all in this place. Christianity had a long history of centuries in this place under the name the St. Thomas Christians. But even in this 19th century, they had no chance of leading the consecrated life. Of course, there were almost all the leading orders of the world that had come to this place and started their monasteries, communities. But they would not admit any of the locals as members in their congregations, because maybe for their own reasons they did not believe that the locals had faith that was deep enough for consecrated life. That would mean nobody in this place, neither man or woman, had a chance of leading a canonically approved religious life. And these founding fathers grieved that in the absence of religious life among us, many good things are left undone. And they were sorry that they did not have any religious congregation of theirs. And therefore, they decided that urgently they must start a religious congregation, first for the men and then for women. Accordingly, they went to the bishop of that time, Maurelius Tabellini, a Carmelite bishop of an Italian. And these fathers sought his permission to begin a religious congregation. The bishop was very understanding, but he said, well, you are the only few priests that I have to help the people in their spiritual needs. If you are gone, Who else will be there to teach and guide the people in their spiritual needs? Therefore, of course, your desire to lead a religious life need not be given up. You do one thing. Instead of withdrawing altogether, you start a monastery right here in the midst of the people, so that from it not only a few of you but all others will benefit. Of course, the proposal was very positive and very acceptable for the founding fathers. But they expressed their helplessness. They said, is that possible for us? Why? We don't have means for that. We don't have any money to establish a monastery. And they added, see, we don't have kings that are Christians. If our kings were Christians, they would have helped us. But unfortunately, our kings are non-Christians, so we have no way of getting any help. The bishop smiled and said, well, I understand your sentiments. I know that you don't have any resources, and I know that your king is not a Christian, but don't worry. You have your people, you approach them, they will generously help you, I am sure. He added, I will give you a letter of recommendation, recommending your case to the people of the parishes. And he immediately wrote a beautiful circular letter and asked the fathers to go to the parishes and the people at large with this letter. As a sign of his goodwill, immediately he himself gave 200 rupees as his share for this great cause. And these two fathers and their supporters went about visiting all the parishes and the parish priests. They were very, very understanding and cooperative. All of them very generously contributed in kind and cash towards this great cause of a new congregation. And very soon there came the date fixed for the laying of the foundation of the new congregation, the 11th of May 1831. On that day, on the mount called Mannanam, the foundation stone was laid for the chapel of the new congregation. That exactly was the beginning of a great thing in this Kerala church. And of course they had to wait for a long time before the congregation was canonically approved, and they made the first profession of the Evangelical Council on the 8th of December 1855. And by then the two fathers, Thomas Palekal and Thomas Porukara, had died. Then it was Father Kuriakos alias Chavara who was the leader of the group, and he was the first one to make his profession of the Evangelical Councils, and thus he inaugurated religious life in our land. Therefore, he can rightly be called the founder of not just this one congregation but religious life as a whole, because almost all the congregations that came to being subsequently were modeled on this one congregation that was started in Mannanam. And thus we should remember this great man as the one who initiated consecrated life in our place in this church of St. Thomas in Kerala. So I am happy to mention that this father has made these two contributions. On the one hand, he was a very good crisis manager, and secondly, he was the one who initiated religious life, consecrated life in this place. We may also add, very soon in 1860s, for Blessed Chavara, of course assisted by another foreign missionary called Leopold Beccaro, began a religious congregation for women in Kochumuttom, and that is what we have under the title the Congregation of Mother Carmel and the CTC congregation. They were a single congregation initially started in Kochumuttom. In the course of time, they divided into the present two congregations, CMC and CTC, and therefore we can rightly call Blessed Chavara as the father of religious life in this land of Kerala. We may recall the efforts Blessed Chavara and that community made to renew the Church of Kerala. Among the achievements that they had in this regard, perhaps the most important one was the efforts they made to give the clergy of this land a systematic and solid training. The first thing they did was to set up a seminary attached to the first monastery in Mandanam, and soon they had also more monasteries. Attached to 4 of them, they had seminaries. The monastery in Elthuruth, and that in Vazhakulam and Pullingund, and also Mandanam, as we have mentioned. We may recall that the senior most of the founders, Father Thomas Palekal, was professionally a seminary formator. He was the rector of the seminary in Pallipuram, under whom Blessed Chavara has his training. And in general, they were very concerned about the priestly formation and spirituality. Blessed Chavara started preaching retreats annually, particularly for the priests. And he also introduced a lot of renewal programs in view of the spirituality and training of the priests. In all the seminaries, the theological training was more systematic than before. And Blessed Chavara was very keen that the clergy should be educated. Quoting St. Ephraim, he once said, "There are 2 sources of enlightenment. First one is the bodily eyes, by which one sees the physical things. The other source of enlightenment," he said, is the learning, by which one is enabled to see things of the next world and God who resides in that realm. And he said, if you don't have this learning, you are spiritually blind, and as a result, you will be blind leaders leading the blind people, which will be certainly dangerous for both of them. And he himself was very conscious of the need for priestly education. It is said right from the beginning of his seminary life, he was committed to his studies of theology and such as the sacred sciences. Another concern that he shared with his Malpan Father Palekal was to organize systematically the canonical prayers. There were days when they had only a few manuscripts of the canonical prayer of the Syrian Church, and therefore the priests were inclined not to give much importance to the daily recitation of the canonical prayers. Under the guidance of Father Palekal, Even as a seminarian, Blessed Chavara started collecting manuscripts from different places, and in the course of time he compiled a full set of canonical prayer according to the liturgical seasons of the Eastern churches. And in 1862 they were completed and were printed partially. Of course, only after his death the complete text was printed. And this text of the canonical prayers was in use in the church for almost a century. Only till recently we have still more revised, maybe more perfect liturgical texts. Again, he wrote down what is called Tukasa in Syriac language, namely a complete set of detailed rubrics for the Holy Mass. Again, the Holy Mass did not have a clear-cut rubrics those days. A few instructions were given on the margins of the Mass text, and which was not complete, and therefore priests were saying Mass in different ways, and that was not very edifying for the people. Blessed Chavara collected information about the rubrics in the original form and composed this book, which again was in use till recently in the church. Still again, he composed the liturgical calendar of the Syro-Malabar Church, that again was in use till recently. In this way, in view of the liturgy and liturgical life of the priests as well as the people of God at large, he made many efforts in many directions, and then he took also care of the discipline of the clergy, and it was Father Palekal who introduced the practice of clergy wearing cassock in our land. So we should be ever grateful to these great people, Blessed Chavara, his rector Father Palekal, and that great man Father Porukara, for the great contributions they made to the Church of Kerala. Thank you very much.